Transforming your relationship. I'm Bonitto Grange, your host again this evening or tonight, wherever you are in the world. And we'll be continuing on our conversation from last week, which is, am I in a toxic relationship? So stay tuned, get your friend, your wife, your husband, and well, welcome back. Am I in a toxic relationship? And we have here two beautiful ladies with us tonight. We have again Jody Jody Campbell Cush. She was with us last week. So this is part two from last week. And we have Carol Ross McLeod from Jamaica. So she's with us tonight. And she's also been with us here sometime back in the past. So welcome again, Carol. She just came off
You.
program which is called Marriage Matters. Her and Sister Jody, they're both instrumental in that program. Marriage Matters, coming out from Jamaica. And every second week they have different conversation dealing with relationships. So if you folks are interested, you can get the hold of the radio station here or connect with me there on my website. So God bless. Again, Sister Carol, welcome again. And how is Jamaica down there? What's the weather down there like? So
Very hot, extremely hot,
extremely hot. Well, it's
extremely hot.
extremely hot. Oh, wow. I guess it's hot for us too up here in Edmonton too, right, Jody? We're looking at 21, I
Yeah.
think, today.
Our,
20.
our, our definition of hot.
Our definition of hot, Carol, is 20, 23. Well, we get to 25 earlier on this year. We're up to about
Mhm,
almost 30 degrees at times, right? So we'll
mhm.
we'll enjoy it. So let's carry on. So we defined toxic relationship or a toxic person. Just to revisit that again, is anyone a behavior adds negative and upset to your life? Many times the individuals are toxic. They might even know that they're even toxic because they've been acting this way for so long, right? But it does cause stress. It could cause some stress. It could cause from trauma. Many different variable that's there. So just to identify that. So we're going to talk about again. What are the early warning signs in a relationship? We did that last week. And again, just we rehashed that. We mentioned some of the early warning signs was no longer feeling happy. You lost your mojo. Everything you do or say is just wrong. When you're not willing to see the other person succeed. You wanted to know where you are all the time or when you be arriving. So a lot of different early warning signs. And I know, Carol, you folks just come off, and Jody, of
Mhm.
Marriage Matters, and you were also on that topic of toxic relationship. So, what did you come up with that? Anything else that showed up in the conversation that you folks had you want to share before we move on?
You mentioned Carol, right?
Carol?
I think, well, our discussions get very heated sometimes. Um, and one of the things we talked about was the fact that when you are in relationship, sometimes it's because you don't understand how to understand the other person.
Mm,
And so sometimes your languages, how you understand each other is just completely off, your
mhm,
communication skills are not where they need to be, and sometimes that can produce a lot of toxicity only because the two partners genuinely don't know how to communicate their needs and their wants and what is affecting them. So again, I love what Jody did last week. I love what both of you did last week in terms of the discussion. But in addition, we can look at the fact that sometimes the communication is just not there, and it's not there not because the persons who are involved don't want to have good communication. They just genuinely don't know how to
mm,
communicate. There could be a number of barriers to that communication. It could be their culture. It can
Mhm.
be the gender, and it can be not just their culture in terms of the country, but their culture in terms of the family background that they're coming from. And
right.
what does that mean?
Mhm,
It can also be what is it that what is their core value, how they view each other, how they view the scriptures, for example. We just come off one of the argument, and I think it's a matter of how we both view the scriptures and we view it differently. And so that within and of itself can cause toxicity, even though you don't want it to, but it still happens.
Still,
Mm-hmm.
the question comes to mind is, how does a person know that they are in a toxic relationship? I mean, an individual that is toxic, but they don't even know they're toxic. What
If
would
you're
be?
miserable all the time, if you have no peace, if you have very little peace, you can't be yourself around the person because you're always afraid that you're going to do something or say something that's going to offend the person. You don't want to do that. When you
Hmm.
cannot express yourself freely, and
Right,
when you find that you're just always unhappy, you're never feeling happy, you're always feeling like you're walking on eggshells. Those are
right.
some of the little signs, telltale signs that you are in a toxic
Mm-hmm.
relationship.
Mm. You have anything to add to that, Jody? It looked like she
Yeah,
said,
just to touch on that too. I was just having a conversation with someone very recently, a friend of mine, and one of the things that she brought up, which I thought was interesting, is that a lot of times when people are in toxic relationships, they actually don't know.
hmm,
And sometimes it takes somebody from the outside to look in and see, hey, you no longer have that twinkle in your eye, you no
right,
longer smile the way you normally smile, that radiant smile
hmm,
is gone, or you don't have that pep in your step, or the things you used to do, or the things that used to define you are no longer seem to be a part of your life. So
hmm,
sometimes it takes a family member or a friend or somebody who knows you to say, no, Jody, you don't look so, you're not yourself, or Carol or Bonito, you're not yourself. Something is going on. And especially if you're not yourself for a long period of time,
right,
then we know it's not just something transient that's going on, it's something long term, something chronic. So sometimes it takes that outside eye. And the reason why is because um, as human beings, we'll always learn to adapt to our environment.
that's true. Yes,
Somebody mentioned the frog, right?
yes. Mention the
Was
frog. Tell
was
us
put
about
in
the frog.
cool water. Yeah, exactly. You put the frog in cool water in the pot, and you gradually increase the temperature. The frog
Mhm,
is going to stay in the water because he keeps adapting and he keeps adjusting. By the time the frog realizes the water is way too hot, it's too late for
too
him to
late.
jump out. So sometimes in toxic relationship, people keep adjusting and keep adjusting and keep adjusting and keep adjusting. So you keep on having a new normal until you don't even remember where the yardstick was. You don't even
Mhm,
remember how far past the line you have gone. You didn't even realize how far past the line you have gone. So it's good to have that outside eye. And maybe that's why too sometimes when persons are in very toxic or abusive relationship, you'll find that in some cases the abuser tries to isolate that person from their family and from their
mhm.
support group. And that's a part of the toxic behavior too, so they can gain more control over you.
That's what it's all about. And it's interesting what you said too. Individual from the outside that knows you and can
Mhm,
identify that something has shifted, and
mhm,
now it's up to the individual now to recognize, yeah, you know what, if she can see that and she's one of my best friends or a good friend, then
mhm,
surely then I need to do something about it. But I
mhm,
find having conversations with different individuals after you've been married for 15 and 20 years, it's like you just feel stuck, and
mhm,
the children are not gone yet, and the individual will stay in toxic relationship for different reasons, as we had mentioned
mhm,
before. But here's a question to you, Cal. Can
mhm.
a toxic relationship be fixed? Can it be decontaminated?
Well, one of two ways. One of two ways. One, if the other person does not want to do anything, you have to fix you. So I don't.
Mm,
The relationship can be fixed in the sense that one person decides to take a different path. Maybe
right.
the maybe the husband or the wife, whichever one, like the situation as it exists. They're the toxic
Mhm,
ones, so they don't really have a problem with the relationship. So the other person has to
Mhm.
find that place in themselves where they no longer allow whatever is happening in the relationship to affect them. However, it is going to affect the relationship. because you have to change your mindset in order to deal with.
Mindset.
In terms of if both of them want the relationship to change, yes, the
Mhm.
relationship can change. A toxic relationship can get better. You either get outside help or and I shared with you the last time when we spoke about a situation with a parent.
Mhm.
And the parents were always fighting. And I was going to use that example, the children. The daughter was very unhappy. And she came to me and she said, Miss, I'm very unhappy. My father and mother keep fighting. When the mother came in and we spoke, I realized that the father feels that she's not taking care of him. And so that's why they keep fighting. It had gotten so toxic that they just fought all the time.
Mm.
When we spoke and we talked to the mother about some of the stuff that she can do, and when she did it, and the husband was so excited, and the two of them just became all mushy again.
Okay.
And and the daughter, you saw the change in the daughter at school. She was a happy little girl. But
Hmm.
because the wife changed, she went and she did what the husband wanted her to do. And so both of them got together and both of them became happier in the relationship. So yes. But it takes two. One
Mhm.
person can't want and the other one don't want it. But sometimes one person has to initiate it. One person has to be the humble one. One person has to be the one that says, I'm sorry, and open up themselves to criticism, to whatever they need to do to get the relationship mended. So, yeah, I do believe toxic relationships can change.
No, you're absolutely right. You mentioned it does take two,
Mhm.
but if the other one is not willing to embrace that love, that closeness again, and everything else that goes with a relationship and with marriage, then that individual now that want to separate or maybe detach themselves either from that environment or whether a break for a while or whatever the case is. But once you're in that, you have to recognize now that you are important to you. You have to prioritize you. You have to
Mhm.
look after you. Like we mentioned, when you're on a plane, right? The first thing they do to tell you is to put your oxygen mask on
Right.
because
Mhm.
you can't help nobody if yours is not on first. So you might still have the children, or there's life ahead of you. So definitely, you have to make yourself a priority, and start incorporating self care and lots of me time. You were going to say something, Jody. I felt you were coming in there a bit.
No, no, no. I was just thinking about what you were saying actually. Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying. I think the me time is important because what happens sometimes to persons in toxic relationships is that they lose themselves, you know.
Mm,
So you don't remember who you were or what you were
right.
doing before
Mhm.
this relationship. So it's really important to have that me time and to find back yourself, to find back what you enjoy doing and to remember who you are
Right.
because you can be devalued in a toxic relationship to the point where you forget who you are.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
literally just forget who you are. You forget who you are and what you were about. So it's a way to put you back on track, I guess I would say.
And how about being contagious?
Awareness. Mhm.
How contagious is a toxic relationship? Not just impacting the individuals, but and we're going to get to the children too. But
Mm.
is toxicity contagious or not?
More than goodness.
More than COVID.
And more than goodness sometimes.
More than goodness, yes, that too.
Sometimes
That too.
I find bad sometimes it passes on so easily, you know.
Mm,
Instead of good. You'd think good would be the one that passes on quickly. Bad passes. You have to gauge yourself sometimes when you're in anything that is toxic,
okay.
just to ensure that you don't become that very thing you don't want. It,
Hmm.
you have to guard, pray, like every day, pray against it and make sure it doesn't become a part of you.
Mm,
My mom, I think my parents are in a toxic relationship. And it's something I talk about. I think they are. But what is scary sometimes is watching it rubbing off a little on my mom. She has
Okay.
always taken the high road about this is the way you're supposed to behave and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and again, I see glimpses of it, like something rubbing off on her. And
Mm,
then you have to squeeze her hand a little and say, Mommy, remember? And she says, Remember, baby. And then she will stop. And so sometimes she just has to leave the house. She has to leave and go to my sister's house and spend time with my sister just to be out of that toxic setup.
Environment. Okay.
mm. As you mentioned that, just an analogy just came to mind. When you're trying to train a dog to be to be wild, to be a fighter dog, to be angry,
Mm-hmm.
persons tend to basically abuse those dogs. You tend to hit them, and you tend to rough them and to treat them in a very aggressive manner because you want to teach them aggression. So I think similarly in a relationship, if your spouse keeps on hitting on you, whether physically or emotionally,
Right.
keeps on criticizing you, keeps on blaming you,
Mm-hmm.
keeps on accusing you wrongfully, keeps on making demands of you, then over time, if you don't guard your heart and guard yourself, you're naturally going to respond, to that aggression and to that treatment. People respond to whatever it is. Even plants respond, sometimes if you water them and give them enough sunlight and sing to them versus when you abandon them,
That's that's what I've heard.
so yeah, so every living creature responds to situations and to how they're being treated, and to have
Mm-hmm.
the right response and the Christian response is not always easy to love those that hate you and
Oh,
despitefully use you.
you're
Because
preaching.
when we read a scripture and we talk about those who hate us and despitefully use us, we think it's people outside. We don't expect it to be the person right next to us
Right.
on the bed
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
or the person eating from the same table with us. So let's call a spade a spade. This is no easy feat. It's not easy. But I think with God it's doable. You might not always get it right, but but
There,
So
sorry, go ahead.
there is a belief in church, in many church circles, that a woman, especially the woman, is supposed to stay with her husband no matter what.
mm,
And that it doesn't matter what, as long as he's probably not killing her,
Mhm.
physically killing her, or if he's
right.
not well, they will have little mercy on it. If you're being beaten, they'll say, all right, maybe you can go away if you're being beaten, but it's bad beating. And and
Mhm.
so the church will sometimes turn a blind eye to raw toxicity. They
Mhm.
will tell you to stay because that is what God would want
Okay.
you to do. And I think there are
But
many persons in church who are suffering because their
mhm.
relationship is extremely toxic.
Right.
To what degree, and and what are the bases upon which somebody should stay in a completely toxic relationship? And I'm looking at it from a church perspective because I have been in church all my life. So
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
how
Six.
far, how much are we supposed to take in terms of
Hmm.
just being a Christian?
That's a very good question,
A good
and
question. Mhm.
I'm sure many have the same thought where that is concerned. How long must I take this abuse? How
Mhm.
long, whether it's physical, emotional, and how much is it impacting me that I'm actually losing myself where I
Mhm.
can't worship like I need to worship. I'm putting myself in a state of depression. I think a person have to prioritize themselves at that time.
Mhm.
I'm not here to counsel anybody to get a divorce or anything. I'm not saying that, but there's nothing wrong with separating yourself from that type of environment, because number one, it's not conducive for your health. And you've heard of individuals that's gone through it for years and for years, but many don't get out because they feel trapped. They have a bit of security because the income from the other person is still there, the
Mhm.
children are still there. So
Mhm.
they endure, they endure, they endure until
Mhm.
until it comes a time when they can just endure no more, right? And
Mm-hmm.
uh, the Bible mentioned that this kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting.
Fasting.
When you talk about a toxic relationship, there's examples in the Bible. King Saul and David had a toxic relationship. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
first they were friends, and then all of a sudden, King Saul was trying to kill David. He was controlling. He was manipulative, trying to manipulate him and trying to take his power away from him. Right? But what did David keep on? David just kept on running. David kept on running because David was saying, "I'm going to allow God to deal with you."
Mm-hmm.
David could have removed his obstacle. He could remove that threat from his life. He had the opportunity, and I believe
Mm-hmm.
God gave him an opportunity to remove himself from this toxic situation. Because when Saul was sleeping, David was right there,
Put a
and
piece of his blanket,
amen.
sorry, not blanket, part of his garment, right,
That's
to
right.
show him
And
close.
his friends was there beside him, say, you know what? God has placed him into your hands. Here's the
Mm-hmm.
perfect opportunity to get rid of, for lack of better words, this toxic man out of your life. God has placed him here. But I believe it. I believe it was a test for David. Also values, right? That he said, you know what? I will not. He had that much fear of God, where he said, I will not touch the Lord's anointed. Right. So there's times I believe in life that a person have to separate themselves one way or the other, because you cannot keep on going down that pathway where it's affecting your children, it's affecting your job, it's affecting everything. But the Bible did say that this kind again goeth not out but by prayer and by fasting. There's a scripture in Psalms, Proverbs 4:23. This is really instrumental. It says, keep thy heart from all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. When I'm going through things, and my brother and I, my brother would say, Bonito, keep your heart pure and stay on your knees. Keep your heart
Mm-hmm.
pure and stay on your knees. So even
Enemies.
in a toxic environment, keep your heart pure and stay on your knees, because God is in control. It doesn't mean that you're going to stay there and take abuse and everything else, but at the same time, a person have to make a decision in their life, whatever that decision might be.
Well, as you touched on, as you touched on, you just mentioned, sorry, I just almost lost my train of thought there. You had mentioned, oh, touch not the Lord's anointed, basically, and the
Mhm.
kind of respect that David had for
Right.
Saul because he was the
Mhm.
Lord's anointed, regardless of the fact that Saul was not behaving like the Lord's anointed,
That's
and
right.
like the Lord's anointed. In the same
Yes.
way, First Peter 3:7 says, "Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives,
Hmm.
and treat them with respect as a weaker partner and as heirs with you of the greatest gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers.
Hmm.
So your spouse is a heir of God, is a heir with you. And so I think Sister Ross had mentioned this before too on another platform, that this is God's child.
Right.
This
Yes.
is God's child. So,
Hmm.
in the same way, if you're not to do the servant of the Lord or the anointed any harm, you shouldn't be doing your spouse any harm.
Shouldn't. You shouldn't. But when the enemy gets a hold of your mind,
Mhm.
you think you're doing right, but you're being controlled by another spirit. As we know, there's a spirit of evil, spirit of good, there's God's spirit, there's a devil spirit, demonic spirit that's out there, right? And but one will never know. One might never even know that they're being controlled. And so I believe there's always help that is outside there, and even where the church is concerned, where prayer is concerned, right? Um, we've seen things, and we've seen where individuals has been healed from certain behaviors, from certain attitudes, right? In the church, we call some of these things demonic spirits, right? But in the world, some might just call it bad attitude, whatever the case is. But
Mhm.
God is a deliverer for those of you that's out there. God is a deliverer for those that's going through a toxic relationship. God is not blind, nor is he deaf. I believe he has and is hearing your prayer, and I believe there's a season for everything in life. I truly believe that, right? So there's hope. I mentioned earlier about how to recognize a toxic relationship. To just going back to what we said earlier, there's an ABCD acronym that's used to help identify that. If you want to know, am I in one or am I not in one? And A stands for accusation. Are you always being accused all the time? B stands for blame. Are you always being blamed all the time? Criticism. Are you always being criticized all the time or most of the time, right? And demands or control. Are you always feel like you're always being controlled where you can actually do nothing, right? So if you're experiencing all that, you can take it to the bank that you are experiencing a toxic relationship. So a question is, for what are the effects? What are the effects? I know, Carol, you've worked with children. That's your forte down there, your career with children in school and whatnot. So, what are the effects on children that's on a toxic relationship? Like, what happened to them? Like, how are they impacted?
I don't even think parents realize the impact they have on their children. A
Mm,
lot of times we can look on a child and tell what's going on at home. Many, many times we can look at a child and determine what is happening at home just by the child's behavior.
right,
So by the
right.
time mommy and daddy come sometimes, we have already, and I'm not saying we haven't been wrong a couple times, but in general, we have already diagnosed a lot of the issues going on just by dealing with the children at school, you know. We see the indifference sometimes and we see how the kids respond, and they respond in different ways. They have different kids. Like for example, at home, if a child is being abused all the time, if a mother or parent is being abused all the time, the daughter may come to school very, very quiet or overly aggressive.
Okay.
The same thing may be true of the son. He may be quiet or overly aggressive. And then when you have that discussion with them, sometimes if that is if they are willing to have that discussion with you, you realize that something is going on wrong at home. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's always a good thing sometimes for teachers to just ask the students, is everything okay? Is everything okay at home? And
Right.
if the child says no, miss, then you take the child to the guidance and counseling department.
Mm,
Sometimes the children may not want to speak to the guidance counselor, and so you have to at least sit down and have a discussion with the child, and then call in the parent to see if you can just have dialogue with the parent. But it's always 9 out of 10 times. If there's a toxic setup at home, you are
mm-hmm.
going to see it in the children. I've had children who excel because they're in toxic relationships at home. Because
That's
when they come to school, they just zone out and it's all
Okay.
about at school. They just focus at school. That's it. They just
okay.
focus 100%. And you would never know until you see the child do something that is strange,
Mm,
like shout at you for no reason, snap off your head for no reason,
Mhm.
and then you realize that something is off. Something is off at home. So like I said, kids behave in various ways, varying ways. And it's not always aggressive. It's not always negative. Sometimes they're overly sweet because they're criticized so much when they come to school. They're very, very sweet to the point
mm,
of being extremely passive. They don't want to give nobody any trouble. They don't want to be in anybody's way.
okay.
If somebody asks them for something, everything they give away all the food. As long as somebody come for it, they just don't want any more trouble.
Mm,
So yeah,
okay.
I
Okay.
remember last week before last, on Marriage Matter, something came out with my own family where in the middle of it, when we were ending everything, Stephen came on board and was saying he became happy when his parents broke up. He said he was so happy when they split up. He was able to breathe again, and he
Okay.
became. That is when he started flourishing in school and in every other area of his life.
Mm,
And so the counselor was asking him, so why do you think that happened? He said it was so toxic. I hated the toxicity that existed in the marriage. I wanted them to break up. And then she said, because I think she has been on the program many times, she said, Carol, I think that's the reason every time he thinks there's going to be an argument with you guys or there's going to be a disagreement, that's why he shuts down because he has that in his mind, the back of his mind, when they used to fight. So he does not want to see any resemblance of it in his relationship, and that's why he
Mhm.
would shut down. So even in adulthood, even in marriages, the children are going to reflect what they see at home. They're going to either fight to have the opposite of that happening to them, or
Right.
they're going to reflect it as it is. They're going to show it as it is. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it affects them in different. Like, and one other example, like for example, his father was very wild, and Steve will do anything to ensure that his relationship remain one man, one woman, and he fights for that. He fights for that. He does not like the idea of many women and what he hates that. And that was him taking the opposite routes to the toxicity that he saw in his
Mm-hmm.
parents' relationship, where his father
Mhm.
was just wild and going all over the place. So
Mm-hmm.
it happened. The child may decide not to allow that particular behavior to cause them to become that person,
Right.
or they become that exact person that they
Exactly.
don't want to be.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, thanks for sharing all of that too, Carol. I was going to ask you too. I think you answered that too. Is how do you detect that? With the children in school, how you detect that they are in a toxic relationship, right? So you brought that out very well and pretty clear there, which is important because as a teacher, you want your student to excel. But it's interesting that you said though that one excel more when they were in school, I guess, because they're like you said, they become more focused and block everything out. So that's something
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. I think one thing I've noticed too with children in toxic relationship is that in many cases too they tend to be angry,
Mhm.
tend to be
Yeah.
angry and to get angry easily. So
Mhm.
anger is one emotion that tends to be present, and I'm not sure why anger seems to be a thing in persons affected like this. Maybe it's because they
It's more
feel as
empowering. It's more empowering than depression.
empowering.
It's more
Yes,
empowering than depression.
that's probably it.
Wow.
That's probably it.
Mhm.
Probably it. But anger and almost a lack of self-control, it can can become an issue, in at home and at school as well. So yeah.
As a young individual, as a child, teenagers, young adolescent, it might take them years before they even come out of that, depending on the help that they will get, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things I had down here, the things that can affect them now down the road, possibility, a high possibility is future relationship issues. When
Definitely.
you're brought up in a certain environment, you begin to accept that as norm
Mm-hmm.
unless you had intervention before you got to that 18, 20, or going
Mm-hmm.
up to those age,
Mm-hmm.
right? But behavior, the disrespect, and this is the effect of them now growing forward. I think
Mm-hmm.
and Carol might have mentioned that earlier too. Behavior change, right? Disrespecting individual, they can end up with poor interpersonal relationship skill, trust issues,
Oh, absolutely, yes.
social competence, right? For them, is it better to stay in a toxic relationship, and with them now because they've been brought up in that environment for so long. Help has to be given to them. And the thing about it is, like you said earlier, Sister Jody, that either somebody's got to point that out to them strongly, or they got to come to this conclusion that I don't want to be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Something has got to shift. So, last question here, folks. I'm a little bit over, but we'll have another few more minutes.
I
Can a
almost wanted
child,
to ask you one too.
can a child be detoxed from a toxic relationship?
Mhm.
Can they be
Outside
detoxed?
intervention.
Outside intervention?
That's usually one of the best ways.
Best ways, okay.
One
Mm.
of.
A question I have though is that how can you get parents to realize that their relationship is toxic and that it
Mm,
is affecting the children, and to get more parents to reach out for help, you know?
mhm.
How do we get that to happen? Because you find a lot of parents are gonna be in denial too, right?
Right,
And
right.
that's not helpful to the children. So, you know.
You know, unless they can see themselves,
Mhm.
the big thing is unless they are if they're not self-aware, then everything carries on as
Mhm.
normal. If they're not
Mhm.
self-aware, nothing's going to change.
Mhm.
A person that consuming alcohol continue that's an alcoholic until they become
Mhm.
self-aware and they get tired of
Mhm.
the behavior, then they'll reach out for help, right? Or somebody will be there to intervene with them, right? But
And one
other,
of
but
the first things that AA will do is get you to admit that you have a problem.
exactly. No, thanks for the reminder. Absolutely, is you have to if you don't admit, then life carries on as normal. But the question is how many lives are being impacted if this behavior doesn't change?
Mhm.
That's the question, right? So we're going to end off here tonight. Any last words for parents that's out there, Carol or Jody?
Everything always falls back to love. If you
Love.
love your child,
Mm,
start looking at the things that you do. The
mm,
first thing you have to do is start looking at yourself. Am I
okay,
being a good parent? What are some of the things that I'm doing that I think is negatively affecting my child? And sometimes turning that mirror to yourself is very, very hard.
mhm,
Very, very hard. But if you're
mm,
thinking about your child's well being and you're thinking about the future growth of your child, there are times when Danielle says something to me and I want to answer and I want to refer up about it or rebuke her, and then something says, be quiet. Listen to what she says. Forget the annoyance in her voice. Listen to what she says and figure out if she's saying something that you need to address, that you need
mhm,
to change. And so, if you're thinking about the well being of your children, the first thing you need to do is to look at yourself and the relationship that
right.
you are engendering around them and see if it is affecting them.
Mm,
No, and you just have to grow up. I know that's hard to say, but if you don't know you're a child, it's hard to grow up if you don't know you're being childish. But again, you
mhm,
kind of have to grow up, look at yourself, and start self-examination to see if you are actually in a toxic relationship.
in a toxic. I like what James 3 and 16 says. For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there will be disorder and
Yeah,
every vile practice. And having been in a toxic relationship, or even to not necessarily get into one, but for a person to be that, it could be because of jealousy, it could be because of their own selfish ambition,
Mhm.
and in a case like that, they're just thinking about themselves and not anybody else. Any last words, Jody, before we close off tonight?
Um, healing.
Healing, yeah.
Healing needs to take place.
Hmm.
Persons in toxic relationships should try to reach out for help. If your spouse doesn't want help, then you need to get help for yourself and for
amen.
your children. So I would say healing, yeah, and detox, because it's not healthy. It's toxic. It's something that's going to cause damage. It's going to cause, it could cause psychological, emotional damage, or physical damage. Begin to affect your physical health and well-being. It could even shorten your lifespan. So people have to kind of get real at some point
Hmm.
to see how much toxicity. You need to have something to measure the level of toxicity that you're really in. So you're living in denial, and you have to seek help once you become aware of it, whether it's awareness from from a friend or somebody outside, or from you detecting it. Once you become
Hmm.
aware, then you have the responsibility to try to help yourself, or your children.
Right,
If your
right.
spouse doesn't want to be helped or doesn't see a need to be helped, then
Hmm.
help yourself and help the children. Mhm.
And I believe the love of God can reach the vilest one can reach the most toxic
Definitely.
one. I believe the word of God is has the potential, the power to change the lives of an individual, because God is love. And such a famous scripture that many of us know that's on this program is, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whomsoever would believe it on him should have what?
Should
Everlasting life.
not perish, but have
They
everlasting life.
should not perish but have everlasting life. So
Mhm.
God's love is there and it can reach you, but you have to come to that point where you want to, where you have to say to yourself that I need help. I cannot continue in this manner, because it's not just impacting me, it's impacting my whole family. Matter of fact, it's not
Mhm.
just impacting my family, it has a potential to impact the next generation
It
and the next
does.
generation
Does.
and the
And,
next
and and if I could just say one last thing as we're closing,
yes.
I believe that as a man of your home, you are the spiritual head. So
Yes.
for the men out there listening to me, the men who have decided to make Jesus your choice,
Go
you are the
ahead.
spiritual head. You are the watchman. And the
Hmm.
Bible says when the thief comes, the first thing he does is bind up the watchman.
Right.
So the first thing the devil is gonna attack, or the first is probably the mind of the watchman to distract
Hmm.
the watchman, so the watchman doesn't realize when he's coming in. And when the watchman is asleep on the job or is not attentive enough, then the enemy can come in and wreak havoc on the relationship, on the wife, and with the children. So I think there's a call to order for our men to stand up as a spiritual head in the home.
Amen.
Why are you distracted? Why are you spending so many hours per day feeding the flesh and no time feeding the spirit?
Mm,
Which one
preach.
do you expect? A preacher came to our church many years ago when I was worshiping in Jamaica. And I remember he's mentioned these two dogs in a fight, and the owner could always tell which dog was going to win. And he said,
Mm,
how do you always determine which dog is gonna win? And he said, because I know which dog is gonna win. It's the one that I feed the most.
mm,
And in the same
mm.
way, if we feed the spirit more
That's right.
time in the word of God, more time praying, more time fasting, more time doing the
Hmm.
things of God, then we're gonna grow spiritually. But if we're
Absolutely.
spending more of the time on Netflix, on the phone and social media and not doing anything which is spiritually uplifting, then we are going to be weak spiritually. And
Absolutely.
that and the flesh is gonna win over the spirit. And it's gonna only make it worse. But if the men would stand up as the watchmen of their home,
All right. Listen up, man.
the enemy couldn't just come in like that and wreak havoc in the marriages and with the children. I don't care what
Mm,
excuse there is,
right.
then it's your responsibility. It is your duty to be the spiritual head and the spiritual watchman of your home.
Okay. That's
Lead and we will follow.
that's a call to remind the men out there, the husbands out there, to live up to your spiritual calling, because you do have a responsibility. So thank you, Jody, again for contributing to part two here. Am I in a toxic relationship? Hope you folks enjoy that tonight. And also on 1:15 in Jamaica in the morning right now. So thanks for staying up, Carol. You've said that you're a night hawk anyway, so I'm not sure if I should say for you or not. Should I?
You're welcome.
So we'll talk again. You haven't been on here before. I've always enjoyed having you on. Also, your husband, he's probably sleeping right now and wondering when is she coming to
Yes.
bed. So we'll catch you at another time. Continue to be inspiration on marriage matters, folks. They have a program there, not next Thursday, but the following Thursday. Marriage matters. It's on Zoom, and if you're interested, you can just connect with me at my website. TLCBonittoGrange.com. And for those that are interested in relationship, you're having challenge in your relationship, you're about to get married, or you're not even engaged yet, but you're about to get married. So I also do premarital relationship. I do marriage coaching also. Also life coaching for individuals that's just going through life and have different challenges in your life, right? So I'm there to be able to help embark with you on that journey. So thank you again. God bless. And you folks have a wonderful, wonderful